I love teaching anthropology, mainly because it continues to teach me. Recently, as we moved to a blended learning format and I faced dwindling online attendance, I reflected upon a few Darwinian concepts, namely adaptation, extinction, and survival of the fittest. These concepts have meaning outside of evolutionary biology. They have a place, I've learned, within education. Humankind straddles over 5 million years of evolution, and we bear witness to the fruits of countless generations of collaborators. Before any innovation in communication could take place, however, we needed to adopt a new mode of locomotion. Our early hominid ancestors needed to become bipeds. What does bipedalism have to do with education? Bipedalism freed our hands. It provided the anatomical and physiological foundation for the emergence of complex communication, namely gestures, speech, the use of images, and eventually, writing. The acquisition of language caused complex changes in the brain, the ways we responded to stimuli, and how we interacted. For example, the ancestral species Homo erectus holds a special place in the evolution of humankind. Not only was Homo erectus the first species to leave home and migrate out of Africa, but it was also responsible for a major innovation in Paleolithic tools, the biface technology. Interestingly, Homo erectus must have employed some effective mode of communication, whatever it was at the time, that permitted learning and the transmission of culture from one generation to the next. To be sure, their Paleolithic tradition, the Acheulean tradition, was replicated with an uncanny exactness for hundreds of thousands of years, illustrating a pivotal moment that shaped the success of our species. Jumping ahead some 1 million years, by 35,000 years before the present, humans began to use imagery to communicate, and another brick line had been laid upon the cultural stratum that was developing. For example, images from Altamira convey, arguably, the dangers of bison hunting, while other parietal art records the animals Paleolithic peoples worshipped and perhaps the animals they preferred to eat. Then somewhere around 6,000 years before the present, cuneiform writing was invented and humans were ushered out of prehistory and into the historical period. Not all humans, however, were successful communicators. Interestingly, reflecting upon the importance of communication, I can't overlook the fact that poor communication may have figured into the circumstances that led to the extinction of Neanderthals. I would be remiss, however, if I didn't recognize recent evidence from Gibraltar caves that suggests Neanderthals did dabble in cave art. It appears, tongue-in-cheek, they invented the hashtag, and if they stipulated communication of 140 characters or less, it becomes obvious why they became extinct. Putting the importance of face-to-face communication into perspective, anthropologists note, humans have 43 facial muscles and are capable of 7,000 facial expressions. 60% of our communication is nonverbal. One doesn't need to struggle to imagine the impact the absence of gestures, paralanguage, and visual symbols have upon the ability to communicate effectively. This is why emoticons were invented, to facilitate communication in the absence of gestures and paralanguage when we use in tandem with verbal communication. We are at a crossroads in education where we must be concerned with more than simply disseminating knowledge. We're forced to consider, given the emergence of online teaching, how best to convey, inspire, and engage our students. This is not to say that the traditional lecture was without challenges. Of course, student engagement has always been an issue, and in the lecture hall, it's painfully obvious to the lecturer when students become disengaged. We can, however, immediately address disengagement in the classroom. For example, early in my career as a college professor, I learned that sleight of hand could be a useful tool when talking about dirt, stones, and bones, especially when it came to producing and lecturing for PowerPoint presentations. Organic matter is composed of carbon, some of which is stable. However, carbon-14 is unstable, I would explain. Importantly, for radiometric dating, we understand that carbon-14 decays. In other words, every 5,730 years, you get 1/2 of the amount of carbon-14 that you started off with while the animal was alive. At this point, I'll give the projector screen a good shake, press my clicker, and thanks to the animation feature in PowerPoint, carbon-14 icons will begin to leave the image of a bone projected on the screen. Okay, it's a little cheesy, but it's an effective way to turn what might be considered a boring lecture into a performance that captures the audience and teaches a concept. In fact, from beginning to end, a good lecture involves performance, and this is often what keeps students engaged and keeps them coming to class on a regular basis. In contrast to my face-to-face lectures, immediate feedback on online attendance is not readily available. It requires some forensic research, so to speak. Fortunately, D2L does make the process fairly easily. One has to go into the system, select Table of Contents in their Course Content section, choose Related Tools, and then select View Reports. If an instructor takes the time to access the information, they'll be provided with a treasure trove of statistics that'll help them assess what's happening in their online portion of the course. To my dismay, when I began to crunch the numbers, I found that a mere 40 to 50% of my students were accessing the online portion of my courses. More worrisome, when I looked at the average time students spent viewing the material, I found that most of the content was only partially viewed. Let's put this into perspective in terms that any teacher can relate to. Imagine you walk into your classroom and find that only 50 of the 100 students enrolled in your course decided to show up. Halfway through the lecture, they all get up and walk out of the classroom. What happened? With respect to the online portion of our courses, why did they leave class? Your guess is as good as mine. Perhaps they had to catch a bus, maybe they needed to help their child out or needed to meet some friends. Others left because they were disengaged. Perhaps they thought they knew the material already, or they had to do schoolwork that they thought was more important, or simply they disagreed with the theoretical perspectives that were being taught. Why aren't students engaging in the online portion of their courses? Sometimes the material that's being presented is boring, but you think, I use excellent TED Talks, Crash Course, or other quality online resources. If this is what you're doing, in all likelihood, their other professors are doing the same. And while I appreciate a good TED Talk or a link to a documentary or the Green Brothers, I certainly couldn't handle being inundated with videos for a total of 6 hours every week. This doesn't mean that we can't use TED Talks or the like, but rather we need to draw upon a range of tools and mediums that engage and inspire our students. For example, in my Forensic Anthropology course, I created a virtual reality where students can enter a carbon-14 dating lab and request that the materials they've been assigned be absolute dated. In this world, they have access to microwear analysis, virtual zooarchaeological experts, or even aDNA analysis. It provides them with an opportunity to interact with the material in a fundamentally different way than you can with a TED Talk. So what are Popowich and Bork up to? Recently, we began to explore the use of sequential art as a way to disseminate and deliver online content, and students appear to be quite receptive to the project. If you want to learn more about how we're approaching online teaching and the use of sequential art, pop in, talk to Dr. Alan Bort, and he'll tell you a little more about our project and the research that we're conducting. Thanks.